Chapter 77. Soft light streamed through the window, scattering gentle rays across the room. I didn't need sleep, neither of us did, yet I found myself lying still, content simply to hold her. Ciel's head rested against my shoulder, her breathing calm, her presence steady and warm. For a long while, I just watched her. The way her hair caught the light, the faint rise and fall of her chest, the quiet peace on her face. Seeing her like that stirred a quiet joy deep within me. When her crimson eyes slowly opened, they met mine at once. A small, serene smile touched her lips. "Good morning, Master," she said, her voice soft and still heavy with drowsiness. "Good morning, Ciel," I replied, leaning in to give her a gentle kiss on the lips. For a moment, we simply stayed there, content to remain in each other's arms. Then, with a reluctant sigh, I finally spoke as I rose to my feet. "I would have liked to stay like this a little longer," I said, smiling. "But we have a meeting to attend." Ciel nodded quietly as she stood beside me, her usual grace returning, though a faint warmth still lingered on her cheeks. After getting up, we prepared ourselves and left for the meeting hall. I walked ahead, with Ciel a step behind me, dressed in her usual maid outfit and mask covering her face. As we approached, the muffled sound of conversation drifted through the door. "Guess everyone's here," I murmured. Without hesitation, I pushed the doors open and stepped inside, Ciel following right behind. A dozen pairs of eyes turned our way as we entered. "Good morning," I greeted them, offering a brief nod before heading straight to my seat. Once seated, I glanced around. Everyone from my seat, my core staff, was present, even the Demoness trio. Ultima and Carrera lounged in their seats while Testa, ever the picture of calm, was preparing tea for me. Though judging by the faint twitch of Ultima's brow, she wasn't too thrilled about it. I was about to start the meeting when Ren quietly appeared beside me, carrying an extra chair. I raised an eyebrow in confusion, but she merely glanced toward Ciel. Understanding her intent, I gave a small nod. "Ciel, sit beside me." Ciel inclined her head gracefully and took her seat next to mine. That instantly drew attention. A ripple of curiosity spread through the room as everyone exchanged glances. After all, Ciel had never sat beside me during meetings, she always stood behind me, silent and composed. I couldn't really blame them for being curious. My close subordinates always sat near me, and they'd even fought over seating positions before Ren had taken charge of arranging them. She'd since established a clear order, each person seated according to their importance and role. At the rectangular table, I sat at the head. To my right was Benimaru, Commander-in-Chief of Tempest's military forces. To my left sat Rigard, our diligent Prime Minister. Beyond them were the others, each in their designated place. So seeing Ciel seated so close that our shoulders almost brushed was, well, enough to surprise anyone in the room. It didn't take long for everyone to start murmuring, confusion and curiosity spreading like wildfire through the room. Then our tea arrived. Testa gracefully placed a teacup in front of me, giving me a warm smile before taking her place behind me, right next to Diablo, and promptly flashing him a smug grin. Diablo, of course, coolly ignored her, pretending not to notice. Meanwhile, Mira and Ruby, the newly appointed elven maids, moved gracefully around the table, serving tea to the others. Ren, however, personally approached with a tray and placed a cup before Ciel. Then, without a word, she stepped back to stand behind me beside Xian. That small gesture sent another ripple of surprise through the room. Ren, my personal maid, the one who managed everyone else, serving tea to someone personally. That was no small thing. As Ciel lifted her cup, the light caught on her hand, her silver ring gleaming softly as it reflected the sunlight. Instantly, the chatter quieted. Every eye turned toward her. I cleared my throat softly, covering my mouth with one hand, just enough to let the same silver glint from my ring catch their attention. Gasps spread around the table as realization dawned on several faces. Those who understood exchanged quick, startled looks. A few others still looked utterly lost, and then, there was Gobta. Of course, completely oblivious, Gobta was snoring lightly, head bobbing as if agreeing with some invisible point. How rude. The meeting hadn't even started yet. I fixed him with a sharp glare, and I wasn't the only one. Several of those standing behind me joined in, their combined killing intent nearly tangible. Bless poor Rigier's soul, he noticed immediately and hurried to wake Gobta before the fool could meet a fate worse than death. Gobta jerked awake with a startled yelp, blinking in confusion as everyone stared daggers at him. His sleepy face clearly said, "Huh, what did I do this time?" I simply ignored him and rose from my seat, letting my gaze sweep across the room. A light cough escaped me as I straightened my posture and began. Everyone, before we start this meeting, I'd like to make a very important announcement. My words hung in the air for a moment. Silence fell, curiosity sparking in everyone's eyes. I'm sure some of you have already realized what I'm about to say, I continued smoothly. Across the table, Hakuro and a few of the wiser ones nodded subtly, already connecting the dots. What I'm about to announce should be obvious. My eyes narrowed just slightly, unless, of course, you were too busy sleeping. I directed a pointed look toward Gobda, who, half asleep again, failed to even notice the verbal jab. A quiet sigh escaped me. Honestly, I murmured before regaining my composure. I glanced toward Seal, who was calmly sipping her tea through her mask. After another delicate sip, she lifted her gaze to meet mine, then nodded softly. Setting her cup down, she rose to her feet. I reached out, taking her hand in mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. Allow me to introduce her properly, I began, my voice carrying easily across the hall. This is Seal, my fiancé. I proposed to her last night, at my house. The last part, I said with a faint, knowing glance toward Testa and the others who had helped with the decorations. For a heartbeat, silence filled the hall, and then the reactions came all at once. Rigard and Geld's faces lit up with unrestrained joy, offering heartfelt congratulations. Shion blinked, Benimaru's jaw dropped, clearly taken off guard. Meanwhile, Diablo, Testarossa, and Hakuro's expressions turned thoughtful, measuring the implications behind my words. Finally, Hakuro spoke, his tone careful but respectful. My lady, are you certain this is a wise decision? His eyes flicked briefly toward Ciel's mask. I mean no disrespect, I am not against it, but... I smiled gently, understanding his concern. I understand your surprise and your caution, Hakuro. But don't worry, I gave his words the respect they deserved before adding softly, it's fine. Then, with a warmer smile, I added, thank you for worrying about me. Hakuro chuckled quietly, bowing his head. My lady, it is our duty. He straightened, his voice firm as he spoke for everyone present. If you have already made your decision, there is no reason for any of us to object. He turned to the others, and one by one, every head around the table nodded in agreement, except Shuna. She was staring at an empty space in front of her, deep in thought. A few seconds passed before she finally nodded, more to herself than to Hakuro, as if she had quietly made a decision of her own. I gave everyone a satisfied nod, pleased with how smoothly things had gone. Then Rigard, ever the enthusiastic one, raised his hand with a beaming smile. We should celebrate this joyous occasion. Let's have a big party. Before I could even respond, Ren sighed, her voice cutting in like a needle through a balloon. No, we're already preparing for the festival. And I'm certain, my lady, that if we throw another party now, you'll suddenly vanish, and all the preparations will fall to me again. Rude, but not entirely wrong. I pouted at her, giving a glare that was more adorable than threatening, even I knew that much, but decided not to argue. Rigard caught on quickly, nodding in defeat, though his face was tinged with disappointment. The poor man truly did love his celebrations. I chuckled fondly and said, don't worry, Rigard. Once everything is over, we'll hold a proper wedding ceremony. And of course, there will be a grand banquet and a party worthy of Tempest. That instantly lifted the mood. Laughter and cheerful chatter filled the hall, the sound warm and genuine. Once the laughter subsided, I straightened slightly and spoke again, my tone calm but firm. Also, there's one more thing I'd like to tell you all. It's a secret, along with Seal being my fiancé. You are not to speak of it to anyone outside this room. My gaze swept across the table, meeting each of their eyes. One by one, they nodded solemnly, understanding the weight behind my words. I was still standing, my fingers intertwined with Ciel's. With my free hand, I gently lifted her mask away, revealing her face at last. The air in the room seemed to still. Ciel's features were mine. Every last detail, from the curve of her lips to the line of her jaw, identical, save for her eyes. Crimson, deep and luminous, carrying their own mysterious allure. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Then silence. I swore I could almost see the brain.x stopped working, signs floating above their heads. The first to recover, strangely enough, was Gobda. He blinked once, twice, then looked from me to Seal, and back again. Slowly, a knowing grin spread across his face. He nodded with exaggerated understanding, as if to say, "Ah, I get it now." Of all people, he was the first to draw conclusions, and the wrong ones at that. I could practically feel his thoughts from here. That idiotic grin screamed, so Lady Rimuru just fell in love with her own reflection, huh? Suppressing a sigh, I smiled sweetly, though my eye twitched ever so slightly. I really needed to correct him before he told anyone I'd fallen in love with myself. If looks could kill, I swear Gobta would have been erased from existence right then and there. Oddly enough, seeing someone else fuming had a strangely calming effect on me. That someone, of course, was Seal. Her crimson eyes glowed faintly with irritation, her expression a mask of elegant fury as she glared at Gobta. The sheer pressure she radiated was enough to make even Benimaru sweat. For a brief, blissful moment, my nerves actually settled, until the second person regained composure. Diablo. He stared at Seal, his eyes wide with awe, before a reverent smile curved his lips. Foo, such a divine sight, he murmured in that deep, velvety tone of his. Ren, who'd been standing beside him, immediately took 2 careful steps away, her usual stoic calm faltering as she muttered under her breath, "Creepy." I sighed. So much for peace and composure. Moments later, as everyone slowly regained their composure, all eyes turned toward me, curious, questioning, and, in some cases, suspicious. And before anyone could make any ridiculous assumptions, like a certain goblin, who was clearly thinking something stupid, I coughed lightly and raised a hand. Before anyone says something idiotic, I began, giving Gobta a sharp glare, "Let me explain." That seemed to settle them a little. Everyone nodded cautiously, their attention fixed on me. "So," I continued, "Seal herself isn't my clone. However, it's true that the body she's using is one of my clones." A murmur spread through the room. Some of the sharper ones like Hakuro and Diablo nodded in quiet understanding, while others still looked confused, Gobta most of all. "I'll explain from the beginning," I said with a small sigh. "A long time ago, I came across a unique slime. It had an unusual presence, faint, but distinct. Unlike most slimes, it had a mind sharp enough to converse with." I smiled gently, as though reminiscing about a fond memory that never truly existed. "I found it fascinating," I said smoothly, "so I decided to give it a name, Seal." As soon as she received the name, she gained a clearer sense of self. But even then, she lacked a humanoid body. After all, she was a slime, and slimes can't normally take humanoid shapes. The only reason I can is because of my origins as an otherworlder and the unique skills I possess. I paused, letting that sink in. So, to allow Seal to have her own form, her own humanoid body, I lent her one of my clones. With my help, she took over the body and formed it into what you see now. Just like how Veldora received a body from me. I spread my hands lightly, smiling at the still bewildered faces around me. That's why she looks exactly like me. It's not vanity, or some strange obsession. She's her own person, the one I love, and the one who's been with me all along. Everyone nodded in understanding, seemingly accepting my explanation. The tension in the room eased, at least for a moment. Except for Gobta, he still wore that confused look on his face, his brows furrowed in deep thought. Then, hesitantly, he raised his hand. "I have a question," he said. I sighed. If he asked something stupid, I was going to throw him out the window. "What is it, Gobta?" I asked, already preparing to do just that. But to my surprise, the words that came out of his mouth weren't idiotic at all. "If it's similar to Lord Veldora," he began, tilting his head, "then why does she look exactly like you, while Lord Veldora looks completely different?" I blinked. That was actually a good question. Even I was curious about that. My gaze naturally drifted toward Seal, silently asking the same thing. One by one, the others followed, until every eye in the room was fixed on her. Seal, as calm and unshaken as ever, lifted her cup and took a graceful sip of tea, as though the entire room wasn't holding its breath, waiting for her answer. The faint clink of porcelain against the saucer echoed softly, filling the brief silence that followed. Then, after a moment of silence, Seal finally spoke, her tone calm, unwavering, and utterly certain. "Altering the body my master offered me," she declared matter-of-factly, "is the gravest crime, punishable by death." The firmness in her voice sent a subtle chill through the room. Diablo, however, only chuckled with deep satisfaction. Foo. Lady Seal is correct. Such insolence would indeed be a sin of the highest order." The atmosphere briefly turned solemn, though Ciel's gaze shifted to me, And in that fleeting moment, her voice lowered to a whisper meant only for my ears. Besides, she murmured, her tone suddenly soft, almost shy, her cheeks faintly pink, why would I ever wish to change what you've given me, master? Her words struck me completely off guard. My composure wavered, and I felt warmth creep across my own cheeks despite my best efforts to remain calm. I coughed softly, trying to maintain my composure before speaking. Now then, does anyone have any questions? My gaze swept across the room. One by one, everyone shook their heads. Seeing that, I nodded in satisfaction and allowed a small smile to touch my lips. Good. Then from now on, make sure to treat Seal as you would treat me. In fact, I trust her completely, so ensure you follow every command she gives. At once, everyone rose from their seats and bowed deeply. As you wish, my lady. Their unified voices filled the hall with a dignified weight. Beneath the table, I reached for Ciel's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. She quietly returned the gesture, her fingers warm against mine. Even through the calm mask she wore, I could feel her happiness echo softly in the bond between us. I cleared my throat once more and spoke firmly, everyone, one last thing. What I told you here is a secret. No one else is allowed to know until I make a proper announcement. Until then, Ciel will continue to act as my maid. Yes, my lady, everyone replied in unison, their voices echoing through the chamber. As I and Ciel sat back to our sit, Ren stepped forward and cleared her throat softly, drawing all attention to herself. Her tone was calm, composed as ever. Now that my lady's announcement is over, it's time to discuss today's tournament. I blinked, slightly confused. What's there to discuss? Is there some sort of problem? We had already gone over every detail before the festival began. There shouldn't have been any need for another discussion, especially since I made sure everything was prepared so my staff and I could actually enjoy the festivities without constant meetings. But Ren's next words made me scowl slightly. My lady, you seem to have forgotten, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Hiro Masayuki challenged you and you agreed to fight him if he won the tournament. I sighed, a little annoyed. The hero isn't much of a threat, so I don't see what the problem is. Ren sighed as well, as if she were dealing with a particularly troublesome child. Her tone shifted into that chiding cadence she used when lecturing me. My lady, you are a demon lord and the ruler of this nation. Challenging you is a grave offense, you can't simply ignore it. He must be put in his place. If you keep overlooking those who are rude to you, you will lose the respect of your subjects. I waved my hand dismissively. I don't think ignoring him will cause much trouble. Besides, even if he wins the tournament, I'll just defeat him myself. I already knew Masayuki's strength, or rather, his lack of it. His unique skill had no effect on me, so the fight would be over the moment it began. Ren, on the other hand, sighed again, that long, weary sigh of someone who's spent far too long managing a troublesome superior. Straightening her posture, she spoke with the sharp tone of a tutor scolding a particularly wayward student. My lady, even if we ignore the challenge, the tournament itself is still a major event. It represents Tempest's power to the world. If the competitors we send fail to live up to expectations, other nations will look down on us as weak. We can't just send anyone, we need to demonstrate our strength. Benimaru, Diablo, Testa and several other staff members nodded in agreement, each wearing the same serious expression. I sighed in quiet defeat and spoke softly, I suppose you're right. We can't have other nations looking down on us. Then I straightened, glancing around the table at my gathered subordinates. So then, who among you wishes to participate in the tournament? The offer dropped like a thunderclap, and the room immediately erupted with reactions. Benimaru's eyes glittered. Oh ho, he murmured, excitement barely contained. I see. Shien's grin flashed predatory and fearless, as if she'd already smelled the hunt. For a moment it looked like she and Benimaru were silently conspiring about something. Should I stop them? Probably not. Testarossa stepped forward with effortless poise, smile polite but eyes sharp. My lady, could you leave that kid to me? She asked, syrupy sweet, though the steel beneath the sweetness was unmistakable. Before I could answer, Ultima leaned in, mischief lighting her gaze. Wait my lady, let me play with him. I'm sure he'd make an excellent toy. Carrera bristled at once. Don't listen to this brat, my lady, she snapped bluntly, eager. Let me blast him. Ultima's expression snapped into full-on offense, that contemptuous tilt she perfected. Shut up, Blondie, I'm sick of you hogging the big explosions. He was rude to my lady, let me torture him to death. Excuse me, Carrera retorted, folding her arms with a scowl. I'm bored of battering Leon's castle with the same spells. Don't you want something new? Let me use my nuclear magic on that hero. It'll be efficient. Ultima's half-smile turned dangerously amused. Efficient, please. Your nuclear theatrics are loud and messy. Real fun takes finesse. Finesse, Carrera scoffed. Two-faced show-off. You mean, tedious. At least I don't blow up my own dinner by accident, Ultima shot back. The argument threatened to escalate until Ren stepped forward. Her smile stayed perfectly in place, but the air tightened. That smile was the same look she wore when I escaped paperwork or when Veldora stirred trouble. Enough, she said, voice smooth as silk and colder than the room had any right to be. If you don't stop, I will ban you from working for a month. Hearing that, both Ultima and Carrera froze. The color drained from their faces as they exchanged one last venomous glare before silently sitting back down, posture perfectly stiff. Banned from working. I blinked, baffled. How is that even a punishment? Leaning closer to Seal, I lowered my voice to a whisper. Seal, why are they scared of getting a day off? Shouldn't they be happy? Seal turned her head slightly, her tone calm and composed as she whispered back, Master, they are deeply grateful to you for granting them names. To them, working for you is both honor and devotion. Everyone in Tempest feels the same. So, for them, being forbidden to work is one of the harshest punishments imaginable. I blinked again, stunned. So basically, being a workaholic is a national trait now. I glanced toward Ren. She was still smiling pleasantly, standing with perfect posture, but I knew better. That woman thrived on paperwork. If being busy was an art, she'd be a grandmaster. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to let her handle a little more paperwork, I thought slyly. It's not like I'm running away from it, just assigning it to the right person. Before I could finish that brilliant line of reasoning, Ren's head turned toward me, slowly. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes definitely weren't smiling. A chill crept down my spine. My lady, she said in that sweet, terrifyingly polite voice. Were you thinking something stupid? I straightened up instantly, forcing a nervous smile. Nope, not at all. Ren's smile lingered a moment longer before she turned back to the meeting. I exhaled quietly. That was close. With a cough, I hushed the room before the arguing could flare up again. Hold on. There are agents all over town right now. Do you really need to go all out in the battle arena? You don't, do you? I hardly need to trample over our foes. Whoa, easy. I held up a hand. Let me say this in advance, Benimaru, Xian, Diablo, Soe, Ultima, Carrera, and Testa, all of you are out. Wah, what do you? Mouths protested at once, but I raised my hand again to quiet them. First, Soe, I continued, eyes on him. You're our covert agent, right? You can't fight while you're supposed to be running surveillance in the crowd. For the first time, it seemed the thought had actually occurred to Soe. He fell silent, apparently convinced. Instead, I said, folding my hands on the table, I have a new job for you. Soe blinked. A job? Yeah, I replied, smiling faintly. From this moment on, I'm leaving all spy operations within our nation to you. And in addition to that, I paused for emphasis, I'm officially appointing you as Minister of Intelligence. Soe's usually stoic eyes widened slightly. Before he could respond, I continued, one more thing. I'm assigning the name Kurayami to your personal team. That includes Soka and the others under your command. For a brief moment, the composed shadow of Tempest looked genuinely startled. Then, bowing deeply, he declared with rare emotion, my lady. Thank you very much. Now, onto the Demoness trio. I want other nations to know just how strong Tempest truly is, I began, my tone calm yet firm. However, if they start viewing us as a potential threat, that would only cause unnecessary problems. So, you three are out of the tournament. Ultima, Carrera, and Testarossa opened their mouths in protest, but I raised a finger before they could speak. In exchange for not joining, I'll grant each of you one personal request. Anything within reason. That instantly changed their tune. The three exchanged glances, their irritation melting into mischievous smiles. If that's the case, I'll accept it, Carrera said first, her eyes glinting with amusement. Me too, Ultima added with a cutesy smile, clearly already plotting something outrageous. Testarossa simply placed a hand over her chest and smiled elegantly. As my lady wishes. With that, the Demoness trio backed down satisfied, for now. That left the real problem children. Diablo, Benimaru, and Xian. Those three would not be appeased by a single request. Benimaru and Xian were too competitive for that, and Diablo, well, knowing him, I was more worried about what he'd ask for. He was a sensible person most of the time, so I doubted he'd demand something I couldn't or wouldn't grant. Still, better safe than sorry. Besides, Diablo's position as my first demon makes him stand above the others, giving him the same treatment might cause unnecessary tension. I rested my chin on one hand, mulling it over. Okay, everyone else, listen up. I straightened slightly, letting my voice carry through the room. I'm establishing a new committee that'll be responsible for handling our dignitaries from the Western nations. I'm calling it, the Big Four. The Big Four, Benimaru repeated, intrigued. Heavens, how grand, Diablo murmured, eyes glinting with dark amusement. I see, Xian nodded sagely, even though I doubted she actually did. Still, all three of them perked up immediately, hook, line, and sinker. Talk about taking the bait. The three of you are far more powerful than the rest of my staff, I continued smoothly. So, I'd like to appoint Benimaru as the head of the Big Four. Out of the remaining 3 positions, Xian and Diablo will take 2. Benimaru's expression turned serious. Of course it did. He understood the responsibility that came with it. Out of everyone here, he was the one who could act in my stead when needed. He had both strength and leadership. Me, as leader. Benimaru blinked once, then nodded firmly. I humbly accept this post. Great, he's on board. I'm not sure I agree with Benimaru as leader, Xian said, puffing her chest out, but I'll let my actions speak for themselves. You'll see, my lady, after my flawless performance, you'll definitely reconsider. I'll proudly call myself part of the Big Four. She was practically glowing with pride. I wasn't entirely sure why the title gave her so much confidence, but, well, if it kept her motivated, I wasn't about to complain. Better not ruin the mood. Then Diablo, with that perfectly composed smile of his, stepped forward. The Big Four, an intriguing concept. Of course, I aim only to be number 1 by your side, Lady Rimuru. However, he placed a hand over his chest, lowering his head reverently. I am still but a fledgling in your magnificent reign. It would not do to be greedy. For now, I shall devote myself to your glory, that I might someday be worthy of standing beside you. Was that a yes? Honestly, Diablo's way of agreeing always sounded like he was reciting poetry. Still, I took it as confirmation. And that settled it. The Big Four was officially formed. The rest of you are free to enter the tournament, I announced, allowing a small smile to curve my lips as my gaze passed over each of them. Whosoever stands nearest to victory shall earn the title of one of the Big Four, both in name and in merit. I would have preferred to say, whoever wins, but I had another plan in mind. Since I had already introduced Seal as my wife-to-be, it only felt right to let her join the tournament as well. Most of my staff had already accepted her presence, but among the Tempest residents, there were still a few, those who lived by strength and survival, whose respect could only be earned through power. Her victory would solidify that acceptance beyond question. A ripple of excitement spread through the group. Then, Hakuro was the first to step forward, his expression calm but eyes gleaming with quiet enthusiasm. An old man like me won't be that useful, he said with a hearty chuckle, but I would still like to test my skills, my lady. I couldn't help smiling warmly. What are you talking about? You're not that old, Hakuro. When it comes to swordsmanship, you could easily defeat even an opponent far younger than you. Your words honor me, my lady, Hakuro said, bowing slightly, though the proud smile tugging at his lips betrayed his delight. Next, Gabble raised his hand dramatically, though his tone was less boastful than usual. I would love to join as well, but alas, I must oversee our science presentation during the festival. Still, he turned toward Geld and grinned. Sir Geld is far stronger than I am. I shall gladly leave the honor to him. I chuckled softly at his theatrics. Don't worry about it, Gabble. I appreciate your enthusiasm. I turned my gaze toward Geld. So, are you up for it? Yes, he replied without hesitation, his deep voice filled with conviction. I will tap into my full strength to ensure the defeat of this upstart Masayuki. He nodded briskly, fists clenched, the air around him almost rumbling with his fighting spirit. Reliable as ever. Next, my eyes landed on Gobta. Predictably, he was snoring. Right there, head tilted back, drooling slightly. I sighed. Figures. With a resigned smile, I picked up the pen beside me and simply added his name to the list. No need to ask. He'll be thrilled when he wakes up, probably. As I tapped the pen thoughtfully, wondering who else should join, CL's calm voice broke the silence. Master, she said with a faint smile that instantly told me something troublesome was coming. Kat will also be entering the tournament. Of course she is. I didn't even bother to feign surprise. It had been far too quiet for far too long, clearly, chaos was overdue. My eyes shifted toward Ren, who had very obviously heard CL's words. Ren's expression remained perfectly composed, except she refused to meet my gaze. Ah, so she knew. Ren, I began slowly, my tone dangerously sweet. She gave a polite cough, as though that might erase her guilt. I sighed softly. Stopping Kat now would be too cruel. She was probably bursting with excitement, and if I knew her, she was planning to surprise me. Well then, two can play that game. A mischievous grin crept across my face as an idea struck me. Molly, I said suddenly, we originally planned for 8 quarterfinalists, right? Molly blinked, startled by my sudden enthusiasm. Why yes, my lady. Good, I said, leaning forward with a spark in my eyes. Make it 9 instead, and the remaining participants will be people recommended by me. That includes Hakuro, Gobta, and Geld. I'll choose the other 4 myself. Let's make it a 16-person tournament instead of 8. Molly's eyes widened. Are you sure, my lady? Making last-minute changes would be troublesome. I nodded, smiling confidently. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Then, turning my gaze toward Ren, who already looked wary, I added cheerfully, Ren will provide you with all the help you need. Ren froze, her face draining of color. Quote. My lady, she whispered, as if praying this was some kind of cruel joke. When she realized it wasn't, she sighed in resignation, shoulders slumping in defeat. Next to me, Seal gave her a sympathetic look, but Ren only responded with a helpless shrug that said, it's useless to resist. I hid a small smile behind my hand. Serves her right for keeping secrets from me. Rising from my seat, I clapped my hands lightly and declared. Well then, this meeting is officially concluded. Everyone may return to their duties or take the day off, according to schedule. With that, the room stirred to life. One by one, everyone stood, bowed, and filed out, though some lingered long enough to share knowing glances or quiet laughter. Before long, only Ren remained, already drowning in her stack of notes. She was now responsible for all the last-minute arrangements and managing today's qualifiers. Poor girl. As I turned to leave, I extended my hand toward Seal. Shall we? But instead of taking it, Seal gave a small, graceful bow. Master, I would like to stay and help Ren. The moment those words left her lips, Ren's perfect-made composure shattered like glass. Her eyes went wide, then, before I could blink, she threw herself at Seal and hugged her tightly, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes. Thank you, big sis. She cried, voice muffled against Ciel's shoulder. I blinked, completely lost. Wait, when did that happen? I thought you were against calling her your big sister, something about pride and professionalism and all that made nonsense. Ren, still clinging to Ciel, replied casually, I was at first. But now that I know I'll marry you in the future, I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Then she turned her head toward me and pouted. Besides, she's not cruel like you, my lady. I froze. Cruel, me. Ren gave a faint sniff, her tone composed but unmistakably pointed. You have a habit of fleeing from paperwork, my lady, she said. And as always, I was left to complete it. Okay, maybe she had a point. I couldn't help but giggle, watching Ren's sulky pout. I was teasing you, I said, waving a hand dismissively. There's no way I'd actually force you to do all the work. Ren looked at me suspiciously. Ciel, on the other hand, gave a small amused smile. Smiling gently, I added, let's finish this together, shall we? Both Ciel and Ren nodded in unison, determination returning to their expressions. And just like that, the 3 of us got to work, sorting through documents, finalizing tournament brackets, and confirming every detail for the day's qualifiers. The sun climbed high, the sounds of the festival echoing faintly from outside, laughter, music, and cheers blending into a distant melody. Yet within the office, time passed quietly. The 3 of us worked side by side, our rhythm smooth and familiar. And so, day 4 of the festival came and went, not in battle or grand spectacle, but in papers, plans, and quiet smiles shared between us. By the time we finally finished, the sky outside had turned a soft orange, the kind that painted Tempest in gentle hues of gold. The sounds of laughter and music drifted faintly through the open window, reminders that the festival outside was still in full swing. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms with a quiet sigh of satisfaction. Finally done. Ren dropped the last stack of documents onto the table, slumping into the nearest chair with a small groan. If only my lady didn't decide to double the number of participants, she muttered under her breath. I smiled innocently. Oh, but wasn't it fun? She gave me a flat look that could have rivaled Xian's when she caught Gobta sleeping. My lady, our definition of fun seems very different. Seal, who had been quietly checking the finalized list one last time, let out a soft laugh. Master, you truly enjoy making things lively. Lively keeps life interesting, I replied, grinning as I stood and walked toward the window. The evening breeze was cool and refreshing. Still, it's nice to have peaceful moments like this too. Ren followed my gaze outside, eyes softening. It's been a while since we worked like this together. True, I admitted, though I think you worked a bit harder than I did. That's an understatement, Ren mumbled. Seal stepped closer, her mask off now, crimson eyes glowing faintly in the warm light. She smiled gently at both of us. You two really make a good pair. Ren blinked, then smiled faintly herself. That's because someone has to make sure my lady doesn't run away from her duties. I feigned offense. Excuse me, I don't run away, I just delegate efficiently. That earned me twin sighs, one annoyed, one exasperated. As we finally made our way home, the sun was already dipping below the horizon, painting Tempest in soft shades of twilight. Seal and I walked hand in hand through the doorway, the quiet warmth of our home welcoming us. I had already steeled myself for what was about to happen. And sure enough, a pink blur launched itself at me the moment we stepped into the living room. I caught the little slime easily, cradling her in my arms with practiced grace. We're home, Shinsha, Shizu, I said softly, running my fingers over her round, bouncy head. Welcome home, Mummy, Shinsha beamed, her voice as bubbly as ever as she nestled comfortably into my arms. Welcome home, Mother. Mom, Shizu greeted politely from the side, her tone calm and elegant as always. I smiled, giving her head a gentle pat as I moved toward the sofa. I sat down, placing Shinsha on my lap. She happily settled in, her gelatinous body lightly glowing with contentment. Seal followed with graceful steps, taking the seat beside me. Without needing to be told, Shizu quickly brought us tea, her movements neat and practiced, like a proper young lady. Ciel's gaze softened as she watched me pat Shinsha's head. Then, smiling faintly, she reached out to pick Shizu up and set the girl on her lap instead. Wait. Shizu tried to resist, flustered for barely a second before giving in with a quiet sigh. The moment Ciel's hand began gently stroking her hair, all resistance melted away. The quiet hum of contentment filled the room. After a while, I broke the peaceful silence with a gentle question. Where's Kat? Shizu, eyes half closed under Ciel's steady hand, replied lazily, she went to Mama's house. Said she'll sleep there tonight. Ah, as expected, she's avoiding me, likely to make her surprise during the tournament even more dramatic. I couldn't help but smile at that thought. Still patting Shinsha, I used thought communication and called out silently, Luna, can you come here without Kat noticing? A curious voice answered immediately. Yes, Mommy. A few moments later, light shimmered in the air, and Luna appeared before me with her usual radiant smile. I gestured for everyone to gather closer. Good timing, Luna, there's something I'd like to discuss with all of you. Ciel glanced at me with curiosity, while Shizu sat up straight, sensing this wasn't just casual talk. Once everyone's attention was on me, I explained my plan for tomorrow, each step, each role, and the little surprise I had in mind for the next day's event. As I spoke, the girls listened intently. Shinsha's eyes sparkled with excitement, Shizu nodded seriously, already thinking about how to help. Luna clasped her hands with visible delight, and even Ciel's calm gaze seemed to soften with quiet amusement. When I finally finished, Luna was the first to respond. Hee, that sounds fun. Of course I'll help, Mommy. Me too, Shinsha chimed in, practically glowing with energy. I'll do my best, Shizu added with a gentle smile, looking up at Ciel for silent approval. Ciel, ever composed, simply nodded. If it is your wish, Master, I shall see it done. I smiled, feeling a gentle warmth spread through me. Then it's decided. To be continued.